Hey everybody, so after my last video I got some comments and also found some similar sentiment online that Assassin's Creed Shadows is being treated unfairly, that many of the things that people are complaining about are things that they would not care about if it was another game or if it was some other studio instead of Ubisoft. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I see some things that I don't fully agree with either. I think there are some things that some people say that are being pushed a little bit too far or that are not being contextualized correctly. So just as a recent example, in my previous video I mentioned this guy right here, Shohei Kondo. I hope I didn't butcher the name too badly. I mentioned him in the previous video because his Assassin's Creed Shadows video was being taken down for hate speech despite him not having any such thing in the video at all. Recently he's been sharing these clips right here where a guy swings at a Portuguese merchant and nothing happens, as in the NPC does not get hit, but how Japanese NPCs can get hit. And another clip where the guy enters a temple and starts swinging a sword around, breaking items inside of the temple, including a mirror which has the same kind of symbolism to the Japanese as a Christian cross would have to a Christian. And these are examples of things that just don't connect that well with me personally when put in this context, which is why I will elaborate on this a little bit more later in this video, in the last topic. Suffice it to say that for now, for me as a gamer, it is not because of the ability to have freely destructible environments, but rather more to do with Ubisoft's carelessness and disregard for Japanese culture, which is shown in other situations, which is what people should have argued with, including Endymion. So just stick with me until we get to that topic in the second half. If you wish to skip around though, then there will be timestamps in the description. However, I do urge you to watch the entire thing because the reason why Ubisoft is being so heavily criticized recently is cumulative. The reason why the Portuguese NPC doesn't get hit, for example, is very likely because he is an interactable NPC, a merchant. Usually we cannot harm these kinds of NPCs, even in other Assassin's Creed games. They have an immunity thing, and being able to kill NPCs in game is normal as well. Although in the clip that he shared, the NPC is not even getting killed, it's just getting hit with an arrow, but nobody died if you actually take note. Usually in the other games, except for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you get the desynchronization message when you kill an NPC, and after 3 kills you get desynchronized. I still have no idea what happens in Shadows because some people claim that the desynchronization message is in and actually happens, but others claim that it's not and you can just kill anybody that you want and all that you get for it is XP. So it's just an annoying back and forth anytime that this is brought up in any discussion. I would say that it would not make any sense at all for Yasuke, a character that is supposedly an honorable samurai according to Ubisoft, to harm civilians. So the desynchronization should definitely be in. In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you were allowed to kill them simply because you were a mercenary. The only consequence was that it raised your bounty level. And now back to the temple. The case of being able to destroy a temple is similar. At the end of the day, it's just a destructible environment, a normal and even expected feature to have in a video game. Usually, I would look at this and I would not see any malicious intent behind it, but I will develop more on this as we go along. There's also only so much that we can get mad at until we're starting to look like woke people trying to censor video game features because they may be offensive to someone. It's a dangerous slippery slope. Although I can't say that I take such a harsh stance on this particular thing because I am probably biased in the fact that I am not very religious. People use the argument that you couldn't destroy a Christian cross in the other Assassin's Creed games, and I honestly don't know. I would have to go back and check the games and try to wreck environments to make sure. I know that in Assassin's Creed Valhalla we obviously can destroy entire monasteries, but Shohei Kondo's argument is that there is purpose to that and also historic accuracy, whereas being able to freely run around Japan and destroy any temples that we want at will without any purpose is just distasteful. I think a lot of this comes down to each person's limits. You can also topple a cross in one of the older Assassin's Creed games as part of a puzzle. I think that if people want to really be offended at that and claim it as distasteful, the purpose of it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's still a video game allowing you to destroy an entire monastery or to topple a cross. All I know for sure is this: Ubisoft couldn't give any less of a about Christianity, as it is something that is currently very tied to conservatism in a way, and Ubisoft is caked with far-left activism. so I wouldn't see them protecting Christianity and attacking Japanese culture. I think the real identifier here is Ubisoft's intentions, and that's what we'll be getting into later in the video. Hey, this is just a little note that I've recorded after the script. I can't be going through all Assassin's Creed games, but I did go through Valhalla. I've been smacking away at crosses and altars in monasteries and churches and cemeteries, and I can confirm that I haven't been able to destroy a single cross or a single altar so far. While the glitter around them can be destroyed, the actual altar part, the tables, the candles, the crosses, the tombstones, they are all static and indestructible. I could load up Assassin's Creed Mirage and go looking for Islamic symbols of faith and altars to see if I could destroy them in that game, but I am honestly quite uneducated when it comes to this stuff, so I don't actually know what exactly do they have that they hold as with religious meaning. Just like the mirror in the Japanese temple, I actually had absolutely no idea that a mirror had such strong significance. So I don't really know where exactly I could go to destroy things. And also, the game is using the same engine as Assassin's Creed Valhalla, so I would say that the destructible environments and physics in both games are going to be very similar, whereas in Assassin's Creed Shadows, they did change this aspect of the engine a little bit so that things are more destructible and that things actually react to where the sword cuts. Or at least in some instances, such as that bamboo clip that we talked about in the last video. While I am still of the opinion that Ubisoft doesn't have any interest whatsoever in protecting Christianity, as it is not really something that falls within the pattern of their ideologies, I definitely understand why Japanese people can look at these examples and get upset as to why is it that we can just destroy an entire shrine in Japan but cannot destroy a single cross in Assassin's Creed Valhalla unless we are doing the historically accurate and gameplay purpose Viking raids in the monasteries. Now let's continue with the rest of the video. What makes this situation with Ubisoft be different is that there are so many blunders, so many mistakes, so many misrepresentations, and even blatant decisions that are going against Japanese culture and sensitivities that it starts becoming a pattern. And the thing is that when you have a blatant desire to be disrespectful towards a culture, while also being a company that has been condescendingly preaching and moralizing on its customers, the result is hypocrisy. And hypocrisy is one of those things that are just highly dislikable. And all of this would have also been very easily avoidable if they didn't want to cross certain lines. Like, everyone knows that Japanese people are very serious about their culture, after all. So for example, why not keep destructible environments, but designate certain locations in-game as safe locations where the environment is static and therefore not destructible? This is where another Ubisoft quality comes to mind, which is that they are not hardcore developers dedicated to their craft. They're not the type of developers to say something like, screw your sensitivities, our game mechanics and creative vision are number one. In fact, they are the opposite. They will bend and break for people's sensitivities so much that so many of their recent games play it safe, have cringe writing and loads of LGBTQ+ representation, even in settings where it doesn't make sense. So not going out of their way to block destruction at a Japanese temple when it's obviously a sensitive thing for Japanese audiences comes across as a red flag. I cannot agree with the same thing when it comes to NPCs. They've been killable in every Assassin's Creed game, just with the aforementioned desynchronization feature, but in this aspect I am inclined to at least think about it, because Ubisoft truly is a company that walks on eggshells to pander to people and force shit into games even when they don't belong there. They're also the company that starts every single video game of theirs with a disclaimer saying that they are a multicultural team of several faiths and several gender identities and blah 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 blah. But anyway, let's shelve that for now and tackle the first thing in regards to the recent debacle, which is the claim that Ubisoft is being unfairly targeted and nitpicked at constantly, when if it was another studio or game, it would have been ignored. So, why is it that Ubisoft is being scrutinized so heavily over things that have been excused in other games apparently? Well, something important to understand in regards to Ubisoft is the fact that Ubisoft has been a fuck-up for years now. The quality of their work has been degrading for a long time, and I think these people who are looking at the backlash against Shadows and saying that it's disproportionate and biased are completely close-minded and looking at it the wrong way. They're looking at this as just this one instance of something, when it's actually a long-running list of of fuck-ups, and an even longer running list of disappointing examples of quality degradation, which also gives way to a bit of resentment. At least, I speak for myself here, let me know if you can relate or not, but I have resentment for what Ubisoft has done for the Assassin's Creed franchise, to their games in general. Not particularly resentment against developers individually, but resentment against Ubisoft as a unit. This is a franchise that I loved, even if they were constantly recycling some of their games to make new ones at $60, at least we were still being given some really good moments with the stories that they were telling. Ezio's trilogy is packed with emotion and character development. It's what made us fall in love with the aspect of the Assassin's Brotherhood. It did more for this franchise than any of the last 6 or 7 games combined, where the aspect of the Brotherhood has been completely lost and we just play as assassins killing random Templars or random mercenaries or Vikings killing cultists. In Revelations, a lot was done for Altair as well, giving his character additional meaningful depth, and I also love the way that these men, both Altair and Ezio, gained the wisdom and humility to understand that there were far higher purposes than their own, and they had the sense of duty to let go of their ego and even of their families in the case of Altair, to protect those pieces of Eden because someone someday would be coming for them.
You have seen to my books?
Yes. Some we sent with the Polos. The rest will go with me to Alexandria.
Good. Very good.
Father, I do not understand. Why did you build a library if you did not intend to keep your books?
You should go. When the Mongols return, Masyaf must be empty.
I see. This is not a library at all. It is a vault.
It must stay hidden, Darim. Far from eager hands. At least until it has passed on the secret it contains.
What secret?
Go, son. Go be with your family. And live well.
All that is good in me began with you, Father.
No books. No wisdom. Just you, fratello mio. Requiescat in pace, Altair.
I love that moment when Ezio speaks to Desmond through time. He can't see him, he doesn't even know who he is or what he looks like. He can't even quite understand what he is or how is it that he knows that Desmond is there, listening. But he does.
Desmond?
He's talking to me?
I heard your name once before, Desmond. A long time ago. And now it lingers in my mind, like an image from an old dream. I do not know where you are, or by what means you can hear me. But I know you are listening. I have lived my life as best I could, not knowing its purpose, but drawn forward like a moth to a distant moon. And here at last, I discover a strange truth. That I am only a conduit for a message that eludes my understanding. Who are we, who have been so blessed, to share our stories like this? To speak across centuries.
These are some of the things that once made Assassin's Creed special and we just lost them completely. There hasn't been any level of depth whatsoever to Assassin's Creed storytelling since fucking years now. Valhalla tried to do something interesting with the Isu and the Ragnarok prophecy, but even then it still fell flat the way that it ended. The whole ancient civilization concept has been completely fucking mangled into standardized nonsense and totally watered down by the amount of garbage that they put in these games nowadays via the Helix store. Once upon a time, a piece piece of Eden or a weapon from an ancient civilization, such as that sword in Assassin's Creed Unity, were actually unique and special things. Now they're just one of the many cosmetic options littered all over these stupid-ass games. They put in a Iron Man suit into Assassin's Creed Valhalla. They put in a full dragon outfit in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. They put in glowing swords. They put in swords that are completely shattered and they are held by gravity or some shit. I am speechless at what they've done to these games. And if you're going to tell me that these are just optional things that are only there to be purchased if you want them, then stop being such a dumb little shill and think for once that these kinds of elements are well beyond an optional thing anymore. Because if you stop paying attention to the lore and the story and the canon of your main games and you start pouring attention into littering your video games with optional bullshit to buy on the side that completely breaks all of that lore and all of that canon, then you are making a choice to prioritize one thing over the other. This isn't even a case where we have a good, robust single-player game, a main game that is good, and then just has a bunch of random crap on the side that we can go and put on to run around with. This isn't the case at all. This isn't what's going on with this franchise. It's the opposite. What should be focused on is being completely ignored, and what should not be focused on is being given relevance. Ubisoft has completely sold out what made Assassin's Creed special, and they replaced all their talented writers with retards. And yeah, I know how harsh that sounds, but I just don't care. In Assassin's Creed 3, we had a worthwhile story between a father and a son, for example. Both so similar, yet ideologically opposed. Small, tiniest little detail, keeping them apart. A small shift of perspective and circumstance could have had them both be on the same side. But instead, their story ends in tragedy. And don't even get me started on the directing of some of the scenes. Remember the assassination of Charles Lee, Connor's #1 enemy? No cringe, no overacting, not even any stupid words exchanged, no nothing. Just two tired, beaten men in a bar. Charles Lee quietly accepts his fate, and Connor doesn't have anything left to celebrate. And also this scene here.
What would you have me do? I made a promise to my people.
If you insist upon this course of action, seek out Sam Adams in Boston. He'll be able to help. What have you done?
When my people go to war, a hatchet is buried into a post to signify its start. When the threat is ended, the hatchet is removed.
You could have used a tree.
Connor looks around as if to see if the coast is clear, his enemy's gone, to remove that hatchet that signified the start of that war is now finally over. But at the same time, there's this heaviness to it. The war is over, but he lost so much over it, with nothing to show for it. Was it all even worth it? These are questions that you can question yourself, all on your own. The game is not trying to force it into your head. The game is not putting some cringe dialogue, narration. The game is just trying to pass along these feelings and emotions just through the directing, the way that they make him look like disappointed or sad or reflective of something instead of, happy and relieved. Assassin's Creed Black Flag also has no shortage of great character moments, thanks to the great job done in that game's story as well. Stede Bonnet's farewell, Blackbeard's death scene, and his quote that in a world without gold they might have been heroes. Mary's death scene, Edward's reflection over all that he lost and getting onto the path of redemption redemption, the slow development of these characters and their relationships. I even liked the tiny little scene where he takes Atham as a child to the theater. Like, we just don't see this kind of thing anymore. We don't see decent writing and directing anymore. We see dumbass writing telling us how the character is feeling. We hardly even see scenes playing out like this anymore. We see these roughly animated fucking templates standing in front of each other yapping, and in other occasions where there's an actual scene, there's these default template animations of walking or bending or doing something with their hands, playing along, that have been getting repeated since Odyssey. It's like they just even barely get their actors to act out scenes anymore. They just rush everything, and it's like they also completely forgot how to write family moments. They can't write a goddamn thing that involves siblings, fathers, mothers, or lovers anymore. It's just cringe romance scenes and vapid gunk that pales in comparison to even the tiniest goddamn scene from the older games, like Ezio and Federico at start of the game climbing that tower.
It is a good life we lead, brother.
The best. May it never change.
And may it never change us.
They have no emotional awareness or nuance anymore. All they have is f***ing Marvel writing. Another terrible obsession with this dumb company was also to do with these settings, like, oh, where will Assassin's Creed go next? Oh, are you guys excited for the next location and time? Yeah, you excited? Yeah, no, I'm not fucking excited. Give me a character to care for. Connor was a perfect example of a character to follow up on. All the people he lost, all the character and wisdom that he gained throughout those years, and he was still relatively young. But then the character is just abandoned because, we gotta do pirates next, and then we gotta do the French Revolution next, and then we gotta do the industrial London next, and then oh shit, get ready, it's time for ancient Egypt. Hold on to your fucking pants, fellas, it's time for ancient Greece up next, and then even a longer time ago, hey fellas, get ready, now it's time to skip hundreds of years ahead and get on to Viking England next year. Like, holy shit, dude, just stop for a second. This is like an amusement park of piss. Take a second to develop your characters. Not every character needs a sequel, sure. I think a great example of that is Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Edward's story was told perfectly, but Connor's story could have done with a sequel. Build some extra rapport with these characters, tell a more meaningful story, and make them more memorable. Same with Bayek and Aya. They were actually likable, and the foundation of the Creed was a great starting point to move on from. They could have gone to Rome after that and followed these characters. Hell, in the lore, it's supposedly Aya who kills Cleopatra with a serpent. Why not give us that game and keep working with established characters? Something could have been done with Caesar's assassination as well. Instead, nope. We just gotta keep moving on to the next thing and the next thing after that, and then the modern day story is completely gone too. We haven't had anything interesting happen since Desmond's death. It's just been a pile of garbage that they make people engage with just to be kinda able to say that the modern day plot line is still there and hasn't been fully removed yet. In Assassin's Creed Origins there were these messages that were found in some hidden locations that looked pretty badass and sci-fi as fuck, and the messages were very cryptic. It almost looked like something was going to come off of it, but then Odyssey comes along and all of that shit was completely abandoned. No mentions back to that at all, and the inconsistency in the story is wild. They give the new female Desmond this sort of a new super special staff that gives them eternal life. It's supposed to be so important and developmental, but then in the next game they kill her off and replace her with fucking Loki. Loki from the Norse mythology. I mean, what the are they even doing with this modern day shit? This is worse than the Star Wars sequel trilogy, where J.J. Abrams makes the first movie, then in the sequel Rian Johnson takes J.J. Abrams' ideas, wipes his ass with them, and makes The Last Jedi, and then after that, J.J. Abrams takes The Last Jedi's fucking ideas, wipes his ass with them, and makes the third movie. What the is going on? It's like each studio is just trying to make up their own garbage, their own lore, their own canon, their own conclusions with these characters, their own conclusions to these stories, without any consultation and consistency between them. This is sort of what I mean with the resentment. They have been ruining this franchise for such a long time now, little by little, game by game. And it's been notable in other franchises as well. I mean, just look at Far Cry. Once it used to have a unique identity, a nice mix of action and survival in an exotic location. Not too hardcore, but just enough to feel different and to offer a unique experience. Now it's just another shooter as they continuously remove more and more features such as crafting. And with crafting gone, it also removed the hunting and the exploration. When you once had to go out and look for a specific animal in a specific habitat region in order to hunt them down and get pelts to craft an additional holster for a third or fourth weapon, or make bigger bags to carry more grenades or healing items, now it's all just obtained by skill points, which has heavily impacted the pacing of these games. Weapon availability and customization has also gone completely fucking insane, breaking immersion even further. Far Cry is a fucking joke now. Instead of leaning into those elements that made it unique, instead of pursuing interesting ways to bring more immersive elements into the structure of the game and maybe additional survival elements to further make that experience different than a common shooter, they went in the opposite direction, and the shills just kept shilling.
Hey guys, this is a brand new Far Cry, way better Far Cry game than all of the other Far Cry games before.
It's one thing to kinda have a company disappear for a while and then return with total shit show of a game, like for example Rocksteady with Soy Squad. That hurts to see. But with Ubisoft, where they had so much time and so much feedback to course correct, but instead just keep making worse decisions, resulting in worse games, it just gets ridiculous and extremely tiresome. And it completely burns through empathy as well. Like for example, we have the Tencent situation right now, and we have the studio shutdowns right now, and people are like, oh, how can you be this way? How can you be so mean and so horrible that you celebrate studios closing down and the company potentially being bought out by Tencent? How can you be happy about this? Well, what the do you want me to feel when this company has been shitting on its player base for so long and still hasn't been able to learn a single goddamn thing and prefers to just blame us instead of taking responsibility? What am I supposed to feel sorry for over here? Am I supposed to feel sorry for a jackass constantly punching me in the back of the head and then running into oncoming traffic? So no, when these issues pop up, they're not like a mistake here and there. Ubisoft are solely responsible for their own terrible reputation. They have fully earned it through their decaying game quality, but also through their corporate decisions, which are caked in hypocrisy. So let's get into that now. The biggest problem that makes these issues with Assassin's Creed Shadows so much worse, and that also contribute greatly to the decay of the quality of their games, is the fact that their studios are far from normal game studios. This company is basically the birthplace of Sweet Baby Inc. This is where its founder came from, and to this day they've been working well together. It's a company completely captured by this soft, hypocritical, politically correct far-left ideology. Hell, it's a company with 7 separate DEI departments, one for each little group. I don't even know how they make this work logistically, and one of these DEI departments is actually directed towards Asian people, making it even less excusable for Shadows to have so many issues. This is a company whose diversity and inclusion VP is so ideologically captured and fucking delusional that she saw talent as a racist concept, that only certain people who looked and sounded a certain way were talented, so her goal is to redefine the word talent.
Some people are really fucking stupid.
Is anyone surprised at seeing bugs, glitches, shit writing, bad directing and terrible story concepts in their games anymore? This is a company caked with activists who think that they are better than everyone else because their little tolerance cult has made them gain a completely delusional sense of false altruism. It's the ideology that is always preaching at people to be better, to be kinder, to be more tolerant, to be more acceptant, to be more respectful, and in fact to go out of our way to be extra respectful and accommodating, to learn more and to walk on eggshells around people of other cultures, and to never commit the cardinal sin of cultural appropriation. And so when we see a company that pushes for this kind of shit, that holds up these values at such a high degree, going out of its way to disrespect another culture or people, it is hypocritical. And that's very much what feels like is happening right now. Because a few mistakes are just a few mistakes, and a few more mistakes than that can already start getting a little annoying because, well, you know, you have an entire department in your company dedicated to Asian representation. If they aren't there to prevent these supposed mistakes from happening, then what the hell are they there for anyway? Of course, I can easily answer that question as well, but it would probably detract too much from this video's point, so feel free to check out this video here instead if you're interested in the subject. It'll be linked in the description and the top comment. However, with Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed Shadows, it feels like we're well beyond the point of mistakes in the presentation of the culture, and we're instead in the territory of challenging that culture. For example, with Yasuke, there was no reason whatsoever to pick him as the protagonist, and center the story on him, and call it historically accurate, and go out of their way to call him the legendary samurai who changed the course of history in Japan. This is the company that removed crossbows from the first game because they weren't 100% certain that they existed in that time and in that setting already. And even up until Assassin's Creed Origins, this was the company that did their research and presented the game world so well that the discovery tour for that game was used as an educational tool. So how is it that they couldn't even do the minimal bit of research into Yasuke to see that the more documents one reads of his history in Japan, the more evidence one has of him not being a samurai? Even Thomas Lockley himself, the guy who wrote the book on him being a samurai, admits that he made up a bunch of shit. Hell, forget about the samurai bit even. This is a game in which seasons pass and all that. It's a game where the events take their time, and Yasuke was reported to only be in Japan for 1 year before being shipped off with the Jesuits after the Honnoji incident. To take this man, paint him as historically accurate, and not only deem him a samurai, but double down on deeming him the legendary samurai is fucking insane. It's painfully obvious that this decision was driven by politics. There were many ways in which they could have either stuck to history and used the Japanese historical figure, or do what they did with the other games and make a fictional character. There's also ways in which they could have involved Yasuke while sticking to what little history was known about him, and maybe even use him as a main character by cutting out the history revisionism bullshit and just calling the game a complete work of fiction. It wouldn't even have surprised most of us because a lot of us, like I said, are already sick of the elements of sci-fi and high fantasy bullshit that they've been putting into Odyssey and Valhalla. But no, they went out of their way to say this is historically accurate. This is Yasuke's story. Same thing with this female character here, a female sumo wrestler, despite the fact that there are no official female sumo wrestlers in Japan. It's against tradition. Oh sure, around the world some people try to appropriate the sport and, you know, they go against that tradition. Even in amateur spaces within Japan there are female sumo wrestlers, but just like I said, not officially. It is even forbidden for women to enter the dojo, the ring where they compete. So much so that a few years ago a man was giving a speech in one and fainted, and a female nurse went up to give assistance and was shooed off of the dojo. Now, the thing about this kind of stuff that deals with traditions and religions, you know, we all have it, including out here in the West. There are no shortage of these kinds of things and strict rules. And the thing about them is that you don't have to agree with them. As a person, you can easily think to yourself that a man's life is far more important than a tradition in which a woman nurse cannot be allowed onto a ring. Hell, as a person, you can even think to yourself that there should be no problem at all with having a separate female division for sumo, and that this tradition is harsh and should not continue. It's perfectly fine to have these thoughts and opinions, but these personal thoughts and opinions of yours should be kept out of the game that you are creating. As the creator of a game using Japan as a setting and focusing on its history and culture, you don't have to agree with these customs and traditions, but what you should definitely not do is make choices that actively go against these traditions, such as having a sumo wrestler companion character and making her a woman instead of a man. If you're presenting a foreign culture or a historic setting, you have to cut yourself off from your own personal morals and values, and you have to respect and properly present the thing that you're basing it off of. It's like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 coming out very soon. Even if you believe that gay people should be able to get married and should not suffer any scrutiny in public, even if you believe that the whole thing about burning women alive because they were believed to be witches simply because they knew how to read or because they knew alchemy or whatever is a completely barbaric barbaric and wrong thing to do, you still cannot have either of these things and many others to be presented differently in the video game, otherwise it takes away the authenticity of the setting. When you do those things that Assassin's Creed Shadows is doing, you're sending a very clear message that you are against that culture's traditions and rules, that you not only don't respect them, but also actively go against them. And I just don't know how else to put this. This is a really bad idea. And not just because of the disrespect towards the setting and culture that is supposedly good enough to exploit for your video game franchise, but not good enough to respect and present accurately, but because now every single other blunder that you do will be seen through a completely different lens. Like for example, all of the shit that people have caught in previous trailers and gameplay footage, suddenly it's like, is it even just a mistake anymore? Like when they use Chinese architecture, was it just a mistake or was it deliberate? When they present things out of season, is it just a mistake or is it deliberate? When they misrepresent customs, was it a mistake or was it deliberate? And other things outside of the game as well, like the piece of merch of the broken Torii Gate, or the placement of the release date on the same day of a terrible disaster in Japan. Were these also just accidents or are they deliberate at this point? How many of these are we just going to keep shrugging away as accidents? I mean, come on. And the questions are perfectly valid because again, if you go back to Assassin's Creed Origins and the Discovery Tour, they had so much research put into these customs that Egyptians had that it was able to be used as an educational tool. So now with Japan, is it all mistakes? Is it all innocent accidents? Is it all just a fruit of their laziness and mediocrity getting worse and worse and worse with each passing year? Or is it deliberate? One way or another, what it definitely is inappropriate and completely uncalled for when this company is caked with consultants and diversity departments. If they are incapable of doing their jobs, then just cut them all off completely. Fire all of these people. Close down these departments. All they're doing is sapping money from the company while actively making the games worse than they were when the departments weren't there. Whether you're excited to play this game or not, these things can't be ignored or set aside. This leftoid hypocrisy is one of the reasons why so many people have turned against it in the first place. You can't simply be preaching values at people, holding them at higher standards, setting rules for them to follow, while then doing the opposite yourself. I understand that destructible environments are not that big of a deal. I understand that we can't give into oversensitivity and want certain things taken down or dialed down just because they may be offensive to certain sensitive people. For example, in Valhalla we set fires to Christian monasteries when doing Viking raids. It would be insane to complain about this and start setting these big no-no lines for video games. It'd just be a different kind of wokeness. But one cannot overstate just how different this situation is with the way that Ubisoft has been acting since the very beginning of Assassin's Creed Shadows promotional content. And that's why I wanted to make this video, because when you simply complain about those clips because destroying a temple is supposed to be bad or because killing NPCs is supposed to be bad, you're passing along a very incomplete or even wrong message. Those are not the reasons why this thing with Assassin's Creed Shadows looks bad. All of this shit, together with all of this context, is why this looks bad, and even suspicious at this point, because it's following a pattern that just can't be excused. At some point you just have to stop and wonder at which point accidental fuck-ups become deliberate indirect jabs at a culture that they are purposely misrepresenting or disrespecting. And I think that the way that people have been arguing about this on Twitter over the past few days hasn't been taking the necessary things into account. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents on the matter. No, I don't think the environmental destruction argument on its own works. If it was an isolated thing, I couldn't see the issue with it because I come at it from my own, let's say, biased position where for me, a game should be allowed to do whatever it wants to do so long as it works and isn't in poor taste. And since I am not a very religious person and the action in the game is purely coincidental, like I don't even see it as optional if there's no optional mission sending you to these places. Existing as it is, it really just comes across as a coincidental thing. I fail to have an emotional reaction to it because of that. But I do understand that there's other people with different biases than me who may actually be more religious than me or have other sensitivities than me where they would see this and have an emotional reaction to it that would be against it. At which point I would encourage caution and discussion so a good middle ground could be reached where we're not going crazy with potential censorship. For example, as I said earlier in the game, protecting the these temples, at the very least the main shrines such as the one with a mirror, by making them static instead of destructible environments would work pretty well. And as for everything else in the first topic, I hope people understand why is it that Ubisoft is being pressed so hard right now over these mistakes. This isn't a unique instance of something, it's a long-running series of issues. This is why Ubisoft is so heavily clowned. They already were with Star Wars Outlaws. They are a massive corporation. They have no excuses to put out such bad games and continuously ignore people's feedback. I don't deny that there's other people out there going hard at them in Assassin's Creed Shadows because of Yasuke, but this is not the main concern. It never was, and bogging it all down to this is far more disingenuous and false than bogging it all down to Ubisoft's failure as a company for the last decade or more. You simply cannot generate this level of hate, this level of criticism, this level of distrust and mockery over racism or misogyny, because there's also people saying that it's because it's a woman and a black guy. The true massive elephant in the room is Ubisoft as a shit company, ruining their franchises and delivering terrible, mediocre content for over 10 years. With that said, I'm getting out of here because I've been sick as f, and I still gotta edit this together before being able to take another nap. So thanks for watching, don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, dislike it if you didn't, and subscribe for more sauce in the future if you're interested. That's about it from me, have yourselves a good day and I'll see you in the next video.